Say to my bride, let's go for a ride in my newfangled automobile. Here's where we will go. Nobody knows, but it's sure a great way to feel. Behind the wheel of the Speed Meter Steel, it's my newfangled automobile. Well, hello and welcome to Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill, and what a treat we have today. I've been invited into the home of Bob Liebensperger. Bob has been seen on this channel before. Those of you who saw the special on Timken, the company, and how important it was to the city of Canton and to the automotive industry, well, this man was the president of Timken Bearing when he retired about 20-some years ago.
Right.
He's the man that brought that company into the digital age when he was vice president of the operation. He is a sales engineer, you know, and you never think of a salesman and engineer as being the same thing, but they really are, you know, when they're smart enough. But more importantly, at least for the purpose of this channel, is that Bob is a man that loves him some cars and loves vintage cars. And I love vintage cars. And so how do you gain that kind of passion, you know, at the age of 86? How did you get that passion? How did you grow that passion? And how has that passion been passed on through the family and even, indeed, through Timken Corporation? Bob, thank you for having me over today.
Great to be here.
Absolutely. So let's start with this. And let me bring this up. This is the AACA, Antique Automobile Club magazine.
Right.
This issue was from September 1949. Now, if I open this, I see in the members' classified advertisements that there's a wanted section. There's wanted. Something's wanted here. And this was a body to fit Model T 1914 Roadster or Touring. And this was posted by Alan Liebensperger.
My father.
Yes. Tell us.
Well, my father got me in the car business. He, in 1938, when they were closing the Little Red Schoolhouse, he went into the school bus business, and he had a contract to haul the kids in the community to the consolidated school. So he started off with a car, actually, and then got a bus, and on it went. That business grew into the Liebensperger school transportation business, and my brother ran it until about 1999 or something like that. He sold it. He had over 200 school buses.
And they were all yellow from the beginning?
They were all yellow. But my father, during World War II, had to get parts for the cars. So he'd go to the scrapyard and he'd see all of these cars. And I used to travel along with him and sit in big cars and pretend I was driving. I was only about 8-10 years old when all this was going on. And anyway, the thing that I remember the most is that in about 1948, he found a 1913 Model T. And that was identical to my grandfather's car on my mother's side, had a 1914 Model T. That 1913 Model T, I had pictures of him at Gettysburg, which was like 60 miles from where we lived, with my grandmother and one of my aunts. My grandfather on my father's side was not a car guy. He thought cars were evil.
A lot of people did back then.
Yeah, and he never drove, never owned a car. But my father was born in 1900, and he grew up with the auto business. And he kind of hated to see all those cars go to the junkyard in World War II. So he decided to start collecting cars after the war. first one that he got was 1918. It was in brass. And of course, the 13 was a brass
All
car.
right. 13's brass.
And he wanted a brass car, and so he bought a brass car. So anyway, I remember hauling that car home with my brother's 8 years older than I am, and we had this car in a garage in a barn piled with all kinds of stuff on it. And when we went to pick it up, we ran into a lot of junk. We had to fall off of it. We towed it home. My brother drove the truck, and my dad drove the Model T, and I was by his side. Got it home. It hadn't been run. The license on it was 1936.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. And I remember he put oil in he took the spark plugs out and put the oil in it and the spark plug holes. And going home, he put it in gear occasionally and loosened the engine up. We got it home. He put the battery on the coils and put gas in the tank. And I remember he didn't crank it very long and it started. And
It's a T, yeah.
that's when I started to get into the car business. My father restored it himself except for the painting. And whenever he was working on the car, I was about 10 years old. Whenever he was working on the car, I'd be there. So I helped sand it down and all kinds of things. And we drove that car. I inherited the car, and that car I have had since my father passed away in 1970. And my mother gave my brother, my sister, and me one of my dad's cars. And that's how I got in the car business.
It also sounds like that's, in how he involved you and how your passion also grew.
Yeah, I went to Hershey with him many times. From the time I was, my father helped. I don't exactly know what his role was. He helped develop Hershey. I think Hershey started in like 1954 or something like that. But he was one of the early
I'll look into that.
organizing guys of the Hershey Car Show. And I was in more parades than I care to be. But I love being around cars.
Yes.
And it led to some good things. My father, he lectured me and I guess nurtured me rather. He always said, he said, I didn't go to the school you did. I have the equivalent of a 10th grade education. But he had the wisdom of a PhD. And but I remember he preached to me that when I grew up, I had to go to college. I had to get a degree again. He quickly realized that probably I should be an engineer. And so I followed his lead. And the other thing he said, you got to give back more to your community than you take from it. And those two phrases which were, I heard that pretty often. And I think
very wise. I mean, look at what Timken has given back to Canton.
And the other thing that he did was, whenever he was working in his shop, he also was in the tinsmith business. And that's what he started out in. And I think it was 1920, he bought a tinsmith, second generation tinsmith out. And he continued to do that work while he was running the bus business, both at the same time, until the bus business got so big, he stopped doing the tinsmith and the plumbing.
Does this have anything to do with why he was into Tin Lizzies?
Yeah, probably. But he was really a car guy. And I think it had to do with, he was growing up when the auto industry was growing up. So, people say kids learn a lot in the first 8, 10 years is when they develop. And so he was developing while the cars were developing.
Yeah.
The car market
It
was
was right at that
developing.
time.
He could, he used to be a judge, and he'd go up to a car and he said, "That's the wrong acetylene tank, the Model T. That's not the one that was on." He knew cars like you couldn't believe, and was a great father.
And Bob, with that said, great. I mean, that passion being shared to you and it growing in you as you've described, how has that passion influenced you, influenced your decisions, and influenced, even the direction of Timken? Like the 1904 St. Louis and things like that.
Well, I went to became a mechanical engineer. I attended WWII University and got my degree in mechanical engineering. He, when I was interviewing for a job, my hope was that I would get a job offer from Mack Truck. Mack Truck was in Allentown then, and that was my goal. Well, it turned out Mack Truck wasn't hiring when I graduated. So I had to look up elsewhere. I interviewed a number of other companies, including Timken. And when it came time to decide on what offers I would take, my dad kind of knew Timken, and because he was in the bus business and had a friend that owned the business, and he recommended that my dad must have talked to him about what my job offer was, and when he listened to this guy talk, he said, "Timken is one of the finest companies he's ever worked with." So my father took the lead and kind of pushed me in that direction. The other thing that was kind of on my side was my uncle in Cleveland was working for a company called P.A. Geyer. And P.A. Geyer made machine tools and the Royal vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
And when the Schott brothers in Cincinnati were in the business of buying companies that their stock was more than what the assets were worth. So they sold that company. They decided to sell the P.A. Geyer company. And the end result was that my uncle bought the vacuum cleaner business. So I was in vacuum cleaner business, involved in it very much. And I always...
Well, that sucks.
that
Sorry,
my
bad
Hoover,
joke.
My Hoover friends.
Well, yeah, Hoover's right here in Canada.
Right,
Well,
right.
at the time.
So I told them all the time that my uncle's vacuum cleaners were better than the Hoovers, and I didn't get very many good comments from my friends. But anyway, that's all part of how I got into the art business, and it really did make me going to the way I was raised made a difference in how I led people at Timken Company and how I think I succeeded.
Yeah, I know that team that you led when it came, for the anniversary back in 1999 when you spearheaded the whole. You found the 1904. You gathered people, volunteers throughout the company, to share, to just give their expertise, their knowledge, or just if they had neither of them, just their elbow grease.
Well, in that regard, when Timken was celebrating its 100th anniversary, I was the president for that was my last year, 1999. 99. And, I came across this model, the St. Louis car by a friend of mine, Bill Maddox, that came over one day and said, we have a customer that wants some Timken bearings for a St. Louis. Did you ever hear that coming? And I said, no, I haven't. And so he pointed me in the direction where this guy was asking for car parts. Well, it turned out to be the George Doris was asking for car parts, Timken bearings to restore a Timken car. And the St. Louis car that was equipped with Timken bearings. George Doris was a neighbor of Henry Timken.
Yeah.
And obviously he needed some bearings. So Henry made the bearings, and I was the first customer for Timken bearings. It was a St. Louis motor carriage car. And so when I checked out this car, it turned out it was the people, George Doris and his friends, pointed me in the direction of this car, and I think it was Alabama or Arkansas, probably Arkansas. And I was able to make a deal, and the Timken family was very happy that they found the first car that used Timken bearings. And
Well, I mean, it wasn't the very first one, because that one was, I think, was actually would have been the 1899 or the 1900 St. Louis, but this was a 1904
yeah,
St. Louis, so it was still one of those very first cars.
the London to Brighton run has a limit of 1904.
Yeah.
So we just made the cutoff. But the car was identical. Next year, 1905, they was a completely different car. This was, I think they call them runabouts.
Mhm.
And it really hit me. Found that car before the Centennial. And the nice thing, after I bought it, I figured I had to get it restored, and it probably cost $100,000 the way I wanted to do it. And one day, my friend Gary Husser and his father came to my office and said, we would like to volunteer to restore the car. And I said, well, that's very generous. But I said, I think we better let the company know in the newspaper that we bought the car and we're asking for volunteers to restore it. And that ended up with the St. Louis restoration team, which was about 15 guys that each did a part of the car. Gary Husser was in charge of the engine, and people were taking different jobs, and it was really I guess you said passion for.
Absolutely. It's sharing that passion, the passion that you've had, going not only to, your family, but to the company.
Yeah.
And that is beautiful. And speaking of family, I mean, you're, 86 now, and you have children, grandchildren, etc. How has your passion for cars that you have gained from your father before been passed on to your family?
Well, my father, he asked me to design for him a scale model of the 1903 curved axles. And I was an engineer.
Yeah.
And I became an engineer. So I drew up a third scale model of the curved axles, which is shown here in the.
Yeah, the video playing, and you can see it now.
And every grandchild that came through the family had that car. And my grandson was the last one to get to use it. And it's still in my basement. garage. So that's how it all started. Um, so I ended up with my grandson. When I retired, I decided that my life was kind of an interest point, going from a sales engineer to a president of a company the size of Timken. I decided that I needed to carry on the tradition in the family. And so I remember my grandson, Andrew, he was about 4 years old, and he knew Grandpa had a lot of tools in the basement. And he came to me one day and said, Grandpa, I got to build a race car for the Indian guides. Can you help me? And I said, sure, be glad to. And I had retired by then, so I had the time. So we built the first year a race car. Well, the second year, he said, Grandpa, I'm going to build a race car for the Indian guides. And he ended up, the minute we started to build it, I'd show him the tools we were going to use, and I kind of wanted to teach him how he would approach a project. And he ended up saying, Grandpa, I want to do it. I want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left him to it. And by the time he was 10 years old, I would have no qualms about letting him work on any tool, including a bench saw. And he just had a natural feel, and I think it was in the genes.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to inherit Grandpa's workshop, and he's going to inherit Grandpa's cars that he still has. I taught him how to drive a Model T when he was 16. And every time he's a very tall young man, every time he drove the Model T, he'd get cramps in his legs. So he wasn't very interested in having that.
It's probably better off with a Model A.
He's better off with which was my grandfather's, my father's favorite car. He drove, we lived near Allentown, and he drove that Model A all over God's country. He had that in New England and in other parts of the country. So that's car is still, that was the car my brother inherited, and he's kind of getting down to selling things that he doesn't think he needs anymore. So.
Well, you said, Andrew's inheriting the car. I know that the Model T, what was that, 15 that you had?
The Model T was a 13.
It was the 13. I know that Howard got that just because he was just too tall to drive it because of the cramps.
Yeah.
And how has he, in fact, isn't he here?
Pardon?
Isn't Andrew here today?
Yeah.
Why don't we ask him how he's been how your passion has affected him?
See what he said?
Yeah, let's do that. So when the question was asked, why shouldn't we ask? Well, here he is, Andrew. Here I am, grandson of Mr. Bob
Well,
Leisler.
let me introduce him.
But
I'll tell you how the first thing I heard from him that said he was a car guy was in the summertime when he was growing up. I would bring him down to work in the cars and do things like in the workshop that I have. And anyway, one night when I was taking him home, I said, tomorrow we're going to fix the lights on the the 64 Lincoln Continental. The tail lights weren't working. So I told him that the night I dropped him off, and the next day we worked on the Lincoln's lights. And I told him the tools we were going to use and how we were going to do it. And he says, Grandpa, why are you doing it that way? And I said, well, how would you do it? And he told me how he'd do it. I said, that's pretty good. But what I found out was he went home and did work on the internet and found out how to fix the taillights on a Lincoln. And that's that's been his handle all the rest of his life. He uses the internet to figure out how to do something. So I've seen him. One time he was working on his car and replacing his truck and replacing the tail lights or
Shock absorbers.
shock absorbers. And well, you tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, just, growing up around the cars, you kind of get, you get used to it. So you kind of go, well, if I can do it this way, let's see how else I can do it. So you look it up, and, when it came to replacing the shocks on that truck, I think it was an F-150. Just picked some up at the parts store, and there's a video that says, oh, wait to cut the little strap till you have the top bolt in, and then the shock will just fall into place. And it's like, well, might as well try it, and it worked out. So I like to think I've had a good teacher, someone who's made me more interested in cars than I would be otherwise. So definitely has had an effect on that, and it's just rubbed off.
So it's like grandfather, like grandson, as he took the the Timken company and took had been involved in cars for so long, and brought technology and the new digital technology. You're also now, having been grown up with that technology,
Yes.
applying that to vintage cars. Would you say, Andrew, that for the future of the hobby and of the enthusiasts lies in applying that kind of technology? And how would you say so?
I mean, a lot of it, comes down passed through generations, but, a lot of people just suddenly find, after years, they get their first car, they're more interested. Because I was always interested in cars growing up because we had the cars here, but I remember when I got my first car in high school, I was like, wow, I can do anything I want with this thing. So I immediately went to AutoZone and put some cheap wheel covers on it that, in hindsight, probably weren't the best looking, but at the time, 16-year-old me thought this was just so awesome. And I know he was the same way when he got his first car. You said you about polished the clear coat off of it.
Yeah, I did.
So, it definitely runs down through the family. My mom likes to say that it was like a copy paste of the car interest, the car hobby from him to me. Definitely.
Yeah, and my father did it to my nephew Alan. And he passed it on to him.
So it is fair to say that the passion for cars is genetic.
I would say so.
Yeah,
Yeah, it definitely runs in the family.
right.
It definitely does. Not so much my sisters, but for me, it definitely does. And I spent a lot of time around him growing up, so I'm sure that definitely had something to do with it.
Bob, that was awesome to have Andrew here. I mean, it was just, I didn't even know he was going to be here. But for him to, to share, how you were so, impactful in that passion and how it goes from generations. And I know that you're actually have a very big writing project on that topic. Can you tell us about it?
Well, the title of the book is Proud Heritage, Family, Friends, Faith, Freedom. I can trace my lineage back to the Reformation in 1517, and I can trace it back, the use of the name, back to Charlemagne in 800 AD. And then my wife and I did a gene study that was put on by IBM and National Geographic that is called the African hypothesis. And in studying my genes, they tell me that I left Africa, went through the Middle East, and ended up in Germany, according to my genetic studies. So that's part of the book. Then I talk about how the family affected my life. You heard the story of the antique cars and my father's nurturing of me growing up. And that's the same thing that I passed on to my grandson that you just heard from. I think it's genetic based. Now, the faith family part is because I became a Lutheran. um, My ancestors actually moved from a Catholic principality in Germany in 1517 to a Lutheran principality so they could be Lutheran. And my reference to the Lutherans was that Martin Luther, when he called the Reformation, he was challenging the Catholic Church to who said you could buy your salvation. And Martin Luther talked about that not being the right thing to do. And so he started the Reformation and talked about spiritual freedom, which his college professor and he debated for quite a while. And he was talking about, the professor Erasmus was talking about political freedom. And that's the connection to what I talk about. The title is Proud Heritage, Family, Friends, Faith, Freedom. But the byline on the title is My Case for Christianity, and how Christianity has influenced the Western culture compared to the Eastern culture. And that's kind of the byline of the book.
Do we have any idea when this is going to be available? Are we
Well,
still in process? I've actually read some of it because
Yeah.
you have some of it prepared. And I have to say, personally, I mean, thank you for even sharing, it's the work you've done so far. When this book goes out, you got to get it. Okay.
The book is in the process of being edited by the people that my friends who made me who I am. And I'm doing it on a book blog, and I have a lot of it. We'll have the writing done. There's a lot of the things on the book blog already, but I will say in about a month or two, you'll start seeing it on the book blog. I'll be able to go and see it on the book blog, evolving from beginning to end.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, Bob, this has been a great privilege.
Well,
You know,
thank
to
you
just
for-
hear about, your father, how, he nurtured you, how you then brought that same passion to your career, to your family, and to hear from your family about how that passion is continuing to grow. Bob, it is an honor to have this time with you today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, you had me. This is your house, not mine. Thanks for watching Vintage Car History, and we will see you next week. Peace.